List of panelists today with us in our collaborative effort to bridge really theater and education for social action. So we'd like to get started by introducing each of the panelists, and I'm going to go ahead and share screen to do that. Oh, okay. Sorry, maybe I can't share screen, so I will just share a little bit about each individual. So today we have with us Dr. Harvey McMurray, who is a professor of criminal justice at North Carolina Central University. He received his Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Maryland, a master's degree from Urban Studies at Howard University, and his doctorate degree in criminal justice at Rutgers, University. He's a former Washington, D.C. police officer in the 1970s. And I have had such a pleasure of getting to know him and all that he does. I honestly don't know how he does everything he does, but he is an incredible human being. We also have with us Professor Penny Carroll. Penny Carroll really is an amazing individual as well, an amazing educator in social work practice and public health, and in community collaborative efforts and spanning over 20 years. She's a professor at North Carolina Central University in the Department of Social Work and empowers undergraduate and graduate students to reach their highest academic potential and beyond the classroom walls. And you will witness that today from some of the work. You'll see that her graduate student, Miss Nora Dicker, has joined us today, will share with us. Nora is a social worker, passionate about working alongside those with mental health conditions and justice-involved individuals. She is a current MSW member student at NCCU, looking forward to graduating in May of 2023. And we are also joined with Mr. Tyrone Baker, a community activist born and raised in Durham, North Carolina. He has made a series of decisions as a teenager that resulted in a 22-year prison sentence. While incarcerated, Mr. Baker completed dozens of classes, acquired numerous trades, and read over 500 books about topics ranging from hedge fund management to race relations. And you will see today the power that Tyrone carries with him in his clarity of vision and how he gives to the community. We are also joined by playwright Najee Brown, who brought the play The Bus Stop to NCCU and worked with brilliant students there to have 6 performances. And with Professor Carroll and other faculty members, we were able to have post-performance discussions. And of course, the artsy people call it talkbacks. And a part of those were 2 amazing students. We have and actors, Halima Williams. She's a junior performance theater major at North Carolina University and has done amazing work. She's previously worked also as a stage manager. She is also an author and published a novel called Bound in April 2021. We also have Kyla Brown from Greensboro, North Carolina. She's currently a sophomore at North Carolina University. She had one of the central roles as well in the play The Bus Stop, and we'll be hearing from her and her amazing insights and with her lived experience. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Harvey McMurray to start us off. Oh, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, teacher, and welcome. This is really exciting to be at this point in such a short period of time. I'm going to talk in two parts. The first being about NCCU, and the second being about the play Bus Stop. So North Carolina Central University is a HBCU. NCCU is one of the 17 institutions that make up the University of North Carolina system. NCCU's motto, and this is important, is truth and service. That's the motto. And all students at NCCU are required to do some type of community service, right? So that truth and service, and we are actually one of the few schools that require community service for graduation. I want to, in 2008, within the faith, the Baha'i faith, junior youth groups was a major part of the Baha'i plan. And there were a sprinkling of junior youth groups and children classes in Durham. That's where we are, of course, Durham, North Carolina. And I'm losing my voice, so bear with me. And so in 2016, the Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is in Durham became a partner with the Office of Community Engagement here at NCCU. So students could then come through the faith in terms of placements and earn community service hours. And now I want to show you, if you can show that picture. This picture came about, and this picture, it really has a lot of parts. Around NCCU, the plan was to develop 9 zones to reach out to the community, the neighborhoods around NCCU. So we thought that it would be important to inform the chancellor of NCCU, Dr. Johnson Akinleye, who's in the center. And the young lady beside her, Ariana, she was then a 13-year-old. She had never been on NCCU's campus. In fact, when we were up in the chancellor's suite, she said, "What is this? Who is the chancellor?" And she asked, well, is he akin to a principal? So we said, yeah, that's kind of what he does. The young lady on the far left, Kiera Dickinson, is a criminal justice major, and she performed 2 years of service, community service, working in the neighborhoods around NCCU. Next to her is Dr. Farah Rosenberg, a counselor, and Ariana. Next to her is Chancellor, I just mentioned, of course, that's me, and another person to my right is Nathan Glines, and then Bob James. The sad thing about this picture is Ariana was telling the chancellor how she was doing good in school. She wasn't getting suspended. And she was so proud of having it because she stopped the fights and getting suspended. In December of 2021, and this was after COVID. So when COVID came about, these relationships just fell apart. So we were not in contact with the junior youth in the programs. In December of 2021, there were 6 young people in a car, and it was a drive-by shooting. And this dear soul, Ariana, was one of the 2 people killed. And one could but think that if she was still engaged in that junior youth program, she would be alive. So this issue about building up communities is not academic. It truly is about life. Okay, if you can take that off, please. So the part 2 is I was introduced to Jeff Albert, I think it was in January of 2022. And shortly thereafter, we had a meeting with Jeff and Chitra. And we came up with an idea of using the arts as a basis, a foundation, if you will, a springboard of sort to engage the community on campus and in the area surrounding NCCU. And so to be brief, Jeff and Chitra, Mr. Kaiser Barnes, a former member of the House of Justice, visited NCCU's campus. And out of that visit, we met with department chairs, Dean Wilson. We met with Kim Pfeiffer McGee in the provost office, and we met with the dean of the law school. And so we were exploring pathways of community engagement and approaching social justice issues. For instance, in the dean from within the law school, the plan was to actually have an annual Lewis Gregory Awards, not awards talk. And so we were really excited about that, and the dean of the law school was very supportive. However, she has since died. She passed on. So that's still something that we plan on doing, as Lewis Gregory was a champion of untold proportions. So we are going to keep that in front of us. The other one was how can we use the arts on campus as a springboard for an interdisciplinary approach to promoting social justice. And this was actually the first time that I'm aware of. I've been on NCCU's campus for 36 years. And the academic departments tend to be in silos, and I'm not being negative, but there was not this interdisciplinary cooperation. But the bus stop helped to facilitate that interaction. So we were really excited. And I'm sorry, I forgot. Also, as part of that delegation in April of 2022, the visit campus was my dear friend Najee Brown. And there was such excitement from the departments and students about this opportunity to have a collaborative approach to social justice and community building. The 3 areas of focus was community building, social action, and public discourse. And and it should be noted that there was a recent letter from the National Spiritual Assembly of Baha'is of the United States. And it said that those three areas I just mentioned, social action, public discourse, and social, and I'm sorry, the community building, that there were ways of awakening the energies latent in the human soul and channeling them towards the betterment of society. And we have a real belief that unless initiatives start at the neighborhood level and engage young people, it will be for naught. So once again, I want to thank the Wilmette Institute and Najee Brown for his sacrifice and service and coming to campus and engaging our students. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McMurray, so much for that. And now we'll hear from the playwright, Mr. Najee Brown, about his work, The Bus Stop.
Hi, I'm Najee. I'm happy to be here in front of you. Thank you so much, Dr. McMurray. Through these past few months from April to now, like, I really consider you a close brother. Almost pretty much a father figure. It's not just the service that I was willing to give, but you really helped me out, especially in my times in North Carolina. The Bus Stop for me, it's the first play I wrote. I've written 7 plays since then. I'm also a director and producer and choreographer. Not just a playwright. I'm very much, I do a lot in theater. I've also been a performer and a dancer. And but this play was my first approach to becoming a playwright. I wrote it back in started late 2016. I finished it in the middle of 2017. I know this play has been used by the Wilmette Institute. I don't know who's here because it is a webinar, but the play talks about, the synopsis is 5 African-American women waiting at a bus stop, and the bus takes them to a prison where their male loved ones are incarcerated. And it's really inspired by the stories of my family, my mother, aunts, uncles, my father. And that's the reason why I wrote it. And just the resilience and the strength of the women who raised me, my grandmother, aunts, and mothers, and how they dealt with the prison system. So yeah, it was my first play, and it was I produced it in New York, where it did very well, and then I did it up in Maine and New Hampshire, where it also did very well. And this was the first time doing it with a school. And I didn't graduate from NCCU, but I feel very much a part of the school now. I love the students. I do consider them family. I love Dr. Shabi. That's my sister. And we've grown very, very close throughout the process. I've been through many processes like these, and I'm about to go through about 2 more by the end of June of putting a play on its feet. And this was very special for me. My family is from North Carolina and South Carolina, but I don't visit the South much. But this was very, very, very special for me. Everyone made me feel like I was at home. The conversations that we got into was just so powerful, and just the willingness and the spirit of the students, and how encouraging they were, how they wanted to get every word right, and how they wanted to make this the best production of the Bus Stop ever, was just like so inspiring for me. And they did. They made the best production of the Bus Stop ever. It was just so incredible. And yeah, we were in the trenches together. It was a very, very short process, but it was tough for me because I was traveling. I'm currently living in Boston, and I would spend 3 days in Boston and 4 days out there, and was going back and forth for some weeks. And but it was incredible, and just a testament of how incredible it was. The students and I and Dr. McMurray and Jeff Albert got to to see and do the play again in Georgia for the oh Lord, forgive me for not remember what it was called, the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival, and that was just another incredible experience. To just put the play back on its feet within the next, like, it was, what was it, 2 months, and to just see them again. I didn't think I would be able to work with them again until the following year, but I got to work with them twice in one school year, and it just even made us closer together. I got to ride with them on the bus from North Carolina to Georgia, which was just, it was a beautiful experience. And yeah, they're I can't say, but so I can't say, you know, I just will keep encouraging them because they're just a unique, beautiful, kind-hearted people, and I really wish them the best of luck in their careers because they're so humble and special. So yeah, it was a wonderful experience, and I'm looking forward to seeing where the bus stop goes from here. I
Thank
think
you
that's all I
so
need to say, right?
much.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Najee. And now we'll hear from our two student actors, starting with Kalima Williams, and then we'll go on to Kyla Brown.
Hi, how's everyone doing? I hope fine this afternoon. I am Kalima Williams, as it's been said, and I played the part of Miss Deb, who's kind of the heart and soul of the bus stop. This was a very interesting experience because we actually got to work with the playwright, and that for an actor rarely happens. So there was that. But what really struck me from a activist standpoint and from a social issue standpoint was the talkbacks that we did. And sometimes after a show, you get to meet the actors and you say hi and you ask them about their process. But this was different because we got to show an issue, and then we got to have people stay afterwards and talk about that issue. And what was so special about that is we got to humanize that issue first, which doesn't always happen, right? Because most times people who have opposing views come into a setting that's already set up to be adversarial. I'm on this side, you're on that side. I have my views, I have my thoughts, I have my points, and I'm not coming off of them. And it's the same thing for the other side. And there isn't really any room for a compromise, or if we're truthful, a solution either, right? And so what these talkbacks did with people from the community, with people who just came, you know, even people who just came to see the actors on stage, they were able to stay and talk about this issue of the prison system and the pipeline and what these family members who were affected, what their lives were like and what laws should look like. And hey, this isn't just bad people who did bad things, but there's a whole vast web of people who get touched when a family member is incarcerated. And there's something that we should be doing about that on so many levels. And being able to participate in that level of communication night after night after night was a very humbling and awe-inspiring thing. And I just think that this is a unique space of theater that can touch people in a way that isn't pushy, isn't assuming, but is humanizing, is connecting, is relationship oriented. And most people do not get their thoughts changed by someone shouting over them, right? Or someone saying, no, look at this, that, look at this. But when you can humanize something or a situation or a people or a thing or an issue, when you can make someone see themselves in something, you can literally change the world. And for me, that's what was so powerful about being on that stage and representing Miss Deb and the thoughts and things that I held inside myself when I stepped on that stage to perform as her and to bring to life Najee's vision. Like that, I think for all of us, that was so important. We like he said, we bonded so much and so well that all of us wanted to make sure that the thing that he had wanted most as he sat down with, pen and paper or computer or whatever it was, that was demonstrated in the best way possible. And I think that the response that we got from those talkbacks proved that it was.
Thank you so much, Kalima. Thank you. I will invite dear Kyla.
Hi, I'm Kyla Brown. I played Mahogany in the bus stop, and she was an activist. She was a daughter of someone who was incarcerated, but of all, she was one of the few people that make the whole five come together as a group. She gave a little youthfulness, if I can say. I really connected with her on a different level because we had some of the same things happen. My father was incarcerated for a long period of time, and it was a lot of hurt there, a lot of anger there. And going along, I always thought, I had a mindset of, at least I had a conversation. I'm not willing to forgive. I'm not willing to let certain things go. And playing Mahogany and her openness to have conversation with women she didn't even know, and letting them in and letting them tell her different ways to handle this situation, and her willingness to forgive her father, because she was just raw for a minute, and then her breaking down and seeing something from another person's perspective really changed me internally from the relationships I have with different people on campus and my father. I think the play really brought up uncomfortable conversations that need to be had. And a lot of times we stray away from uncomfortable conversations because we don't either want to hurt someone or we don't want to be hurt ourselves. And the sisterhood and the willingness to forgive that was entwined in that whole play, things that we did on a daily basis just to get in character so that we can come together and show people that spirit and that life of it, really helped not only the play come to life, but I feel like help us. We're still bonded as family, as you can see, very much so. And I feel very happy to be a part of it because I can go back. Don't have the best relationship with my dad, but we're best buds now just because I was able to take some things that I learned along the play and the meaning behind having to be open, be forgiving, be willing to learn from the past, not forget it, but use it to carry on a new meaning and a new goal in life. And that's something that I'm so excited to be a part of. I'm so excited to have talkbacks with. So, yeah.
Well, Kyla, thank you so much for sharing your lived experience and moving accounts with us. Even though I'd heard it before, every time I hear it, I feel moved. Thank you. Before we go on, I want to invite Dr. McMurray to just say a few words.
Yes, thank you very much, Chitra. I just want to acknowledge our tremendous students. I mean, they are awesome and they really encourage the heart. And I could not let this moment go by with saying, I understand in part the sacrifice of our dear brother Najee. I mean, the sacrifice I picked him up at the airport. He was half asleep. But I love this brother so much. So Najee, thank you, sir. And the last thing, she's not here, but Dr. Stephanie Howard Sabi. She was a real champion. She's the department chair for theater and dance. And we went to her in like May or the end of April. They already had a production schedule for that fall. She went to her faculty and they agreed to put aside their scheduled play and allow Najee to come and bring in Bus Stop. So she's a real trooper. I have no idea how she does what she does. Dr. Asabi is, I mean, there aren't words to really describe what she does. And she loves her students so much. And so even though she's not here, I hope she hears this and know how grateful we all are to what she has done. And hopefully Najee will be back in fall of 2023.
Indeed. Thank you. Absolutely. We echo that at the Wilmette Institute, dear Shabi, wherever you are. I hope you hear this. We're going to move on now to Professor Carroll, who will talk a little bit more about the educational aspect of social action.
Yes, I am so excited. Thank you for allowing me to be here and be part of this platform. I just want to say real quick, I remember when I attended the play, and I think I went up to Najee after it was over, and no, I think it was during intermission. Now, I've been attending plays since the 70s and 80s. I've everything from Mahalia Song, The Wiz. I've attended a lot of plays. My mother really introduced me to theater in that way. I went up to him and I said, "Are these students? I thought they had borrowed actors from a agency to do this production." It was absolutely amazing. He said, "Yeah, these are NCCU students." Just beautiful, just done in excellence. I think I was there on a Saturday because I had class, and so the class that I'm going to be talking about is the social work and psychopathology class that I teach with MSW students who are pursuing a master's degree in social work. And so if timing could not have been any more perfect for an assignment that I do every fall semester, that's part of this curriculum, is an assignment that students are to write a paper on a DSM-5, on a psychopathology disorder, and something that is passionate to them. And they are to do something, usually something that's somewhat of a hot topic, what's going on in the community. And so it's just ironic, the hot topic that Nora selected was PTSD in prison. And so she used that diagnosis. Students would do the research, because I always share with them, if you're going to advocate for social change, if you're going to advocate for something, do your research. So the paper, she completed the paper. It was very well done. It was very intentional. It had a lot of statistics and information. And so after the paper is done, I think about students and say, okay, you know what? We need to do more than just paper. How can we take your passion about this topic that you selected, where everyone can, where it all can be, where an awareness can be heightened outside of the walls of the classroom? So that's when I started using technology. So after a paper is, after students will do their paper, do their research, the next assignment is to create a public service announcement, and they can do that through video. And what that does, what I have noticed in my years of teaching, is that it cultivates creativity, an area of creativity that they probably would not have thought that they could do even in our profession. And I was trained in the era of information. I was not trained in the era of technology. So this is something as a professor that I've had to embrace wonderfully because I enjoy it. So anyway, this public service announcement, and obviously, you share with students the purpose of public service announcement, heighten the awareness, talks about change, what are some of the solutions? And this is what happened out of this timing of this production and this assignment. And so being part of this interdisciplinary team with Dr. McMurray, my chair actually, Dr. Creighton actually invited me to be part of this team because I really had not, actually it was part of, I think it was a lot of chairs that was involved. And she said, you know what, my plate is full. She said, Penny, this fits you because I am an artist. I'm a creative artist myself. And I love art. I love creativity. And so being part of this team, I just, we had our discussions about, okay, now that this production is here, I was just kind of putting two together. We need students to have a after production discussion. And I had thought of 4 students, but the one student was not in class. So there were 3 that were there, and Nora was one of the students that I went up to ask. And it really encouraged the students. It kind of takes them out of their comfort zone because Nora, you can correct me. I don't know if you said, yes, I'll do it. She was like, well, can you tell me a little bit more about, she was asking the right questions. Tell me a little bit more about this. And so I see that potential in students to take leadership on these initiatives. And I read her paper and she had already completed her paper. And I said, you know what, this is such a good fit. And so the public service announcements reaches platforms outside of the walls of the classroom. I encourage students to load these PSAs on their social media and then get responses back. And that was part of an assignment that I've had prior that I may put back in, but we have kind of a watch party. And we'll play the PSAs on social media, and then we talk about the responses that they get back. And so it's like I said, the timing could not have been any more perfect. And it just, see all this come together. It's just like, wow, this is just great. This is just, if I had tried to configure this myself, I know I would not have been able to do that. This is huge. And so I think the next thing that we're going to view, I believe, is the actual public service announcement that Nora created. And I could not be more pleased to present this to you. And I believe it's and I guess, is Nora going to be able to set this up? And I'm hoping that this will get views over and beyond, because it's really a powerful public service announcement.
Thank you, Professor Carroll. Our tech team has it ready to go. Thank you.
Imprisonment are extremely negative and long-lasting. Violence levels are high, the treatment by correctional officers is often demeaning and violent, the healthcare within the system is severely lacking, and there's often a sense of loss of individuality and self-dignity. The experiences of those who have been incarcerated vary greatly, but one factor does remain consistent, and that is the experience of trauma. An underexplored phenomenon is the development of post-traumatic stress disorder among this population. The DSM-5 describes PTSD as when an individual has experienced, witnessed, or a loved one has experienced or witnessed an extremely traumatic event. And as a result of this, they relive that event for weeks or months with the additional symptoms that can cause life disruption. The population that has the highest prevalence rates that's been researched heavily of PTSD is combat survivors. However, many of the factors present that cause PTSD are extremely common within the prison system. Evidence shows that between 4 and 32% of men and between 16 and 58% of women who have been incarcerated experience post-traumatic stress disorder. This evidence shows that the prevalence of PTSD among this population is very high, but with such a large range of percentages, it lets us know that there is more need for this area to be explored via research. I would like to now introduce Tyrone Baker, a published author, essayist, entrepreneur, and someone who spent 14 years within the North Carolina prison system to further discuss this topic.
Hey, Nora, thanks for having me. I can definitely confirm that PTSD is a problem, and it is very much underexplored amongst those who have served time in prison before. A lot of the criteria that's used to diagnose PTSD can be found amongst the previously incarcerated and currently incarcerated populations. For example, the physiological responses. That can come in the form of, feeling nervousness when around police officers, or feeling a little tense whenever you see a pair of New Balances in the mall. The New Balances being the shoes that were worn by people who are incarcerated here in North Carolina. Another criteria used to diagnose PTSD is the avoidance of external stimuli, or the avoidance of external reminders of the trauma. For me, this will come in the form of never watching 60 Days In or any of the prison-centric shows. And it would also come in the form of being averse to having conversations about my experiences in prison with people who have not been incarcerated before. Another criteria used to diagnose PTSD is hypervigilance. This is like a staple of post-incarceration life. This comes in the form of being in a crowd and scanning the crowd and looking for other people who may be scanning the crowd. People with bad intentions are probably scanning the crowd. So you scan the crowd to see who is looking at you. You looking at, people's apparel, how people are dressed. A guy or a woman who's a threat, they're not going to have on flip-flops. This is very problematic, and all of these criteria that are used to describe or diagnose PTSD are pretty much universal amongst people who have exited the prison system. I can say as a society, it is in our best interest to further explore this phenomenon and to really dive into the way in which PTSD affects people who have been people who are incarcerated and who have been incarcerated. In order for us to lower the chances of recidivism and to keep, the level of crime commission to an all-time low, it is vital that we explore these issues and that we address the harms that are experienced by people who have done time before. We actually need to create a system of healing and understanding to ensure the health of our entire communities.
Thank you so much, Nora and Tyrone. We'd love to hear your comments about the PSA.
Yeah, so the PSA, as you all know, it was an assignment from Nora's assignment that she completed for Miss Carroll's class. And as far as the content itself, a lot of that material came about. There were things that I was already aware of, things I've been experiencing since my release in 2020. So I had already kind of like had it in my mind. I felt like some things were going on that, I'm like, this can't be as underexplored as I think it is. So I started seeing some close parallels between my experiences and PTSD, and like the hypervigilance, the scanning the crowd, the, avoidance, the, not talking about it with people who haven't been there type stuff, the physiological responses, the tensing up when you're seeing the police. I started seeing all of these things and I'm like, you know what, this is some PTSD stuff. Like, this is serious. So when Nora kind of like presented this to me, I was like, you know what, this is something that I think that, we got a few things to say about it, and at the time while in prison, I couldn't really see the trauma while the trauma was happening. It's called post-traumatic stress disorder. So after the trauma ended, after I got out is when I really started seeing the effects of these issues, so it's really been a relatively recent phenomenon for me to wrap my brain around, along with all of the other things that come along with being incarcerated. Like, now to this day, I have a problem with meal planning. Like, I completely suck at it because, for so long, my meals were provided for me, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like, now I fall apart sometimes, but like, oh, I haven't eaten today. Like, what is going on? So even like when it comes to sleeping, like when I'm awakened out of my sleep, it's very hard for me to go back to sleep because for most of my adult life, when I was awakened out of my sleep, there was a reason. Like, I was awakened and my adrenaline was immediately pumping. So now when I'm awakened, my adrenaline is immediately pumping. So I'm awake, like I wake up at 3 a.m. and be up all day, So those, along with PTSD, those other issues, like it really brought it into, frame on how impactful this psychological condition is and how pervasive it is amongst this population. So I jumped at the opportunity to take part of it with Nora. She saw some of these things while she was working at a transition house with guys that were recently released, So it was cool though. It was cool.
Yeah, so just hearing this assignment with Professor Carroll, how we were supposed to choose a hot button issue or a hot topic, so something that is maybe debated or underexplored. And so a population that I have been doing most of my research for my master's program is the justice involved population. And so Tyrone had done recently a talk with NAMI Durham talking about PTSD among justice involved individuals, which kind of opened my mind further to exploring that particular diagnosis. I did work at a transitional house for men who had been released from prison. A lot of them were men who had mental health illnesses already diagnosed or some physical disabilities. But regardless of that diagnosis status, we required all of the residents to get a mental health evaluation. And this was because of our understanding that they either experienced or witnessed trauma through their incarceration. There really is no ability to debate that because of the high level of violence that does occur in prisons. So really my experience from that transitional house and then hearing more about Tyrone's story, it seemed like a no-brainer to pull him into this PSA so that we could really bring a lived experience into it. So now Chitra is going to talk a little bit more connecting mass incarceration to the Baha'i faith.
Thank you so much, all of you, for all your contributions thus far. And I just wanted to let each one of you know how truly it's a gift to be walking this path of service with you, exploring and working together. So, I mean, I wanted to start off by saying that when we see the prison industrial complex, or we see any other manifestation of injustice in society, things that are broken down, whatever the social, economic, political systems all around us, it's like a tree. We have to see why it's giving bad fruit, and we have to look at root causes. And when we're looking at root causes, we need to think about what are our values and beliefs. What are our ideologies that give way to making choices that would manifest in such injustice? And in order to do that, I think we need to challenge our societal notions about the nature of human beings being incorrigibly evil. That from a Baha'i perspective, every human frame, every soul has been created noble. Just as a candle, its purpose is to give light, just as a tree, its purpose is to grow and give fruit. The purpose of a human being is to be good, to give, and on a macro level for humanity to fulfill its true destiny, to become united, to produce good. And so this kind of, notions that our society carries about historically we've been bad. And so these are the ways we need to protect our society, is by locking people up, right? If we look at the conditions of how change is created, it's through education. If instead of locking people up and not investing in them, we utilize education, we will see a huge difference in what society can produce. And it reminds me of this quote that the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, means the glory of God, said. He said, "Regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value." That's what we all have, inestimable value. Education can alone cause it to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit from. What kind of society will we have? My dear sister, Professor Carroll, unleashing that potentiality in her pedagogy. Imagine if we had those kinds of educators every step of the way. If our educational system, for example, did not use the deficit thinking model for people of color and say, what is wrong with them? Why is there an achievement gap? Why can't they catch up? Instead of looking at reality, looking at the conditions that have given way to the inequity that we have in society, not jumping over the fact after segregation, we had redlining, that communities were created where there is no investment, where crime increased, where then people were incarcerated and forgotten and locked up. And so when we start looking at the root causes of issues, then we will be able to have a holistic perspective to have lasting solutions. And so as we try to do that, we will have huge, we know that we need to be having a united vision and to have united action, but we're so polarized in this society. And one of the reasons is the ideologies that, founded this country, and that is with white supremacy. So if we go to the next slide, I'd like to share a quote from Baha'u'llah that challenges those notions, especially because if we think about the role of religion, a lot of times people will say, it does make things a whole lot messier. Okay, so we can't argue with that because of the disunity that the ignorance of humanity causes. But we do know that religion is has a vital role in the building of society. So looking at various perspectives and spiritual teachings, indigenous ideology is really important. And here is one from Baha'u'llah. So this is actually his son, Abdul Baha, in a quote where it says, Baha'u'llah once compared the colored people to the black pupil of the eye, surrounded by the white. In this black pupil, you see the reflection of that which is before it, and through it, the light of spirit shines forth. And so in the Baha'i writings, people of African descent have a very special role in the whole vision of humankind. So if we were to make the analogy that all humanity is as a body, if one part is not functioning well, it will affect the whole body, then the vision is a very important role. Now let's take this analogy and say, if Baha'u'llah is saying that Black people are like the pupil of the eye, and that you can see the reflection before it, what if our nation were to see through the Black experience our history, where we are now, the impact of that history now? Perhaps we could build a much more truthful future, a more just and united future, should we reflect on this passage. So with that, I'd like to move on because there isn't enough time to go deeper into every aspect of a more inner, perspective of social transformation. But I'd like to invite Nora and Tyrone to take us to some of the practical solutions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chitra. So just to get a good idea of what mass incarceration looks like in the United States, currently we have 2 million people in prisons in our country. So that's a pretty large social problem, and something that the bus stop does a great job in illustrating is the person who is in prison is not the only one affected by incarceration, right? So that scope is much larger as well. So as it's such a large social problem, there are a lot of different causes and solutions to mass incarceration. One of those causes that I have focused a lot of my research on is known as the school to prison pipeline. So students who have been suspended in grades 7 to 12 are more likely to be incarcerated in young adulthood. And that is what's known as the school to prison pipeline, that those suspensions or expulsions funnel students into incarceration in the future. So there are some solutions that have been proven and studied to help disrupt the school to prison pipeline. So one of those types of solutions are restorative justice practices. These practices are not used exclusively in the school setting. They're also used as a replacement to our criminal justice system. So these practices focus on providing healing and reconciliation for a crime or a hurt that has been caused versus focusing on the punitive practices. So a couple examples of those would be a healing circle. So anyone affected by a crime or an incident that happened in school, all people would be able to come together and speak about that, the reasons maybe why it happened, the causes, how it made them feel, and what they as a group would like to see for reconciliation of the event. And then there are also mediation, and that's pretty common used in schools. So say two students are getting into it together, having an altercation, mediation could be used as a tool to have a safe place for those students to discuss their issues, to find out what type of resolution can come to. Then there are also alternatives to suspension programs. So some of those programs can look like a place, a organization, a structure for students to go to once they have been suspended or expelled. But then there are also practices and programs that can be used to prevent the suspension from even happening. So there might be a place where, or a program where they're teaching students positive coping mechanisms. So if they're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or angered, instead of disrupting the class that might lead to a suspension, they can exit and use these coping mechanisms to calm themselves down in a healthy and productive way. I also work at a program as a student coordinator, and it is an alternative to suspension. So when students are suspended between 3 and 10 days, they come to our program and we work with them by doing social emotional learning groups, goal setting, and also practicing those positive coping mechanisms as well. And then there are also alternative school settings. So sometimes people are unable to complete school or attend school due to other responsibilities or things that are occurring in their life outside of the school setting. So there have been some schools developed to have a much smaller class size so that these students who may have issues like high anxiety or ADHD, they're able to work more one-on-one with the school staff and teachers. Or there are other alternative schools such as evening schools to help kind of address those other barriers that the students may be experiencing in their life. So of course, as I've said that, there are a lot of different causes to mass incarceration. There's a lot of different solutions, but I do want to refer back to the quote, one of the quotes that teacher shared about how if we really invest in people, if we really invest in our students and use education as a tool, we can really help them see their own gems that they have. And then really the success is unlimited that they could see if they see their own strengths. So now I'm going to pass it to Tyrone, who's going to share another solution that he has based off of his experiences.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's cool to highlight the school to prison pipeline as one of the causes or one of the fertilizers of mass incarceration. The school to prison pipeline focuses on individuals who have not yet been to prison. I guess they're at the beginning of the pipeline, so to speak, or the beginning of the mass incarceration spectrum or funnel. So I actually have some ideas on how people who are actively in the system and who are currently incarcerated, to address mass incarceration, you have to focus on pre, during, and post imprisonment. So the during imprisonment, there are a lot of things that I think can be done to address some of the causes in there so that individuals come out of prison as whole adults, as fully functioning citizens who are capable of tackling any community they go to. So for starters, when you look at education, education is huge. I went to, I believe, 11 different prisons over my time incarcerated, and every single one of them had a bulk, like a stash of computers. Most of them, we weren't allowed access to them. They were just sitting in cabinets that collecting dust. But there were some that had computer labs where we were allowed to take computer classes where we could do typing. In my book, which is called A Convict's Perspective, which is available on Amazon, by the way, shameless plug. But in the book, I actually talk about how some of these computers could be equipped with internet access, by bringing in a router, throw up some firewalls so guys can't look at things they shouldn't be looking at on the internet, and give us access to platforms such as edX or Coursera or Udacity or Harvard. All of these institutions, they offer collegiate level courses for free online, So I'm like, why wouldn't you give guys this captive audience? We don't have a 9-to-5 that we were going to while I was inside. This is a captive audience. You could give us access to those elite sources of education and allow us to, get the education that's needed in order for us to prevent, coming back to prison when we get out. Even when it comes to our health, our mental health. I've been to plenty of prisons that had 1,000 detainees, 1,100 detainees, and only one psychologist. Some of them had two. I'm like, how is that? I'm like, in what world does that make sense when you have platforms like telehealth platforms where people can get therapy like virtually? It would take very little to set up a system so guys could be getting that type of therapy like inside virtually, like couple that therapy and counseling with those great, amazing college programs that inmates should have access to, or people who are locked up should have access to. And it sets the stage for guys to come home as whole, fully functioning, complete adults. Even when it comes to, and I'm not talking about, extra funding needed. There's a lot of waste being done in prison. I'm talking about reallocating resources to where the impact will be more significant. You got 70 something prisoners in North Carolina now, you got 70 something GED programs, and you have 2 college programs. I'm like, how does that make sense to me? Why can't some of those GED programs, the resources that's being put into those, be put into post-secondary education? Can we at least get 10 prisons to have college programs if the budget doesn't change, if the cost of doing so is the same as the current operations? Like those types of common sense practices, I think should be tapped into, and they're not. Even when it comes like economically, I worked a job in prison for years, and they paid me 40 cents a day. Like I would give a full 8-hour, sometimes 10-hour day scrubbing toilets, mopping floors, and I couldn't even buy a postage stamp afterwards. I'm like, if you want to, the prison industrial complex is real, but I do think there's a way to give guys in prison, I guess, decent opportunities to not only earn money, but, to take care of their family, to help pay any restitution that they may have, to give them that sense of waking up and taking their behinds to work and then getting off and actually being able to see fruit from their labor. That I think that those tackling mass incarceration from within, using those 3 strategies, from telehealth to virtual education to, the last thing I said, economic empowerment, through giving guys jobs that actually pay reasonable wages where they can get a sense of fulfillment from it. Like paying me 40 cents a day it's crazy, but coupling all of those things together, I think will be an amazing solution to address some of the ways in which prison itself fertilizes mass incarceration and recidivism.
So then we're good to move on to the next slide, and we'll talk about racial disparity that's present in the criminal justice system. So here I have just some statistics to kind of give a picture of what the numbers are before Tyrone really puts his lived experience to fully give a full picture of the racial disparity that is present. So in general, Black people are incarcerated 6 more times than white people. And so then also, if we're looking at race and gender, 1 in 3 Black men have a high likelihood of becoming imprisoned in their lifetime compared to 1 in 17 white men. So below is a visual, and this data was taken from 2018, which was a couple years prior to the 2 statistics that I just listed, but that just gives you a racial comparison by gender from the prison policy initiative of those disparities. So as you can see, it's very clear that racial disparity on the men's side. And then it's also important to note, since we have talked so much on education, that this racial disparity is absolutely present in the school to prison pipeline, or in the rate that Black students receive reprimands or suspensions. And so Black boys are suspended 3 times the rate of their enrollment, which is much higher than any other racial group that are students. And this disproportionality is also present for Black girls as well. So now if you'd like to take off.
For sure. I mean, I think that any conversation about social justice in America, of course, there are always hints about America's original sin, which is, the enslavement of people who look like me. And I definitely, we all know how mass incarceration, even contemporary policing and phenomenons of that nature are offshoots or residue of the way in which people like we, were held in chains and stuff. The modern day policing being a direct descendant of the slave patrols and things of that nature. But I do want to, I say that to say this. I say that racism and racial disparities are baked into the very fabric of mass incarceration and mass imprisonment. When I was locked up, I did 14 years. My first 2 years were spent in the county jail, where I did not see another white person for those entire 2 years until I went to court. And that was kind of mind blowing to me. It was like, how is it that I can be in this jail and they have me in a block because of the nature of my charges. They have me in a cell block where the only other individuals in this cell block over a 2-year period, they all like look like me. So of course that was enough to trigger some like little racial, beacons of interest in my brain. Hold on, something's going on here, and the process of going to court in and of itself. I mean, full disclosure, I was involved in the taking of someone's life. I played a role in it. And in the beginning, when I was first incarcerated, I have vivid memories of being in that courtroom, looking like I look and sitting across from, here's an old white man in front of me just talking to this other old white man, this DA, and they're trying to decide whether or not they want to kill me or not, and like put a needle in my arm. And this other white guy that's sitting to my left is supposed to be talking to this other white guy about the merits of not doing so. I'm like, here I am sitting in this courtroom, young little street kid from Durham, and I'm listening to these 3 old white men talking about whether or not they should kill me or not. I'm like, hold on, understanding what I did to get to that point, but I'm like, this doesn't seem like a very productive way to deal with these types of issues. You know what I mean? Individuals who go through this process and are hit with the racial sledgehammer in this way, they tend to develop a lot of animosity towards the other race, and then they're funneled into a prison system that itself is extremely racialized, gangs and stuff like that. So I'm like, the prison system as it's currently set up, not only are people being herded to prison in a way that is extremely racist, but while they're in there, their negative racial sentiments are being strengthened and fertilized and concretized. And these are the individuals that we heap shame and contempt upon when we release them back out into society, because they aren't able to function as fully evolved adults in this racialized society we live in. That is mind blowing to me. I'm like, that is actually counterproductive the way the system is currently operating, and I can't help but look at it for what it is. Like, maybe the system is running exactly how it was designed to run. It was never designed to uplift people who look like me. It just wasn't designed to operate that way. So I'm like, okay, if the system was designed to run that way, the architects of the system are racist, the current beneficiaries are racist. So it's up to us, people who lean to the left, it's up to us to really be like, you know what, how are we going to fix this system so that all of society benefits from it and not just a select group, while another select group is being thoroughly victimized from it, and that's the conversation I think should be had. So yeah, Chitra, I definitely think Chitra would like to introduce a few things here, with all that being said.
Woo. I really don't know if there's much more to say. Thank you for your invaluable contributions, each of you. And Tyrone, thank you for leading us straight into hopefully a dynamic Q&A. We are open now to taking some of your questions. Dorothy says here, I've done a lot of talkbacks for a play musical I wrote about racial harmony. What worked for us over the course of 10 years was to start with what was the motivation for writing the play. Then each actor sharing their character, what that character means to them, and what they've learned from inhabiting their roles, and the questions from the audience. We often had someone prominent in the community as a moderator, but not always. So I think that was more of a comment, but if anybody has any comments or questions that they would like to put in the Q&A, we are ready for those. And while we are waiting for that, I would love to open it to the panel to ask each other questions. We heard a lot. Or make comments, they don't have to be questions.
I don't know if I have a question. This has been just rewarding for me, and the information has just been very, very intentional. I was just thinking about, if I had not asked Nora to participate in this, where would we, I would not have had this level of information. And so I was just thinking, and it's not patting myself on the back, but I think one of the questions was that, when you're working with students, you just really assess those students who have those leadership qualities, and that could really play a part in something of this level of creativity. And I'm just so thankful. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much. And it looks like we have a question about where people can get Tyrone's book. Tyrone, if you could please put that in the chat, I'd appreciate it. Yarnell.
Lord just put it in there if I'm not mistaken, right?
Mhm.
And it's on Amazon. It's a convict's perspective, critiquing penology and inmate rehabilitation. It's basically me. When I was inside, I was actually reading a lot of work from criminologists and penologists, and I felt like they were, I mean, no offense, but I felt like they were sitting in their ivory towers, you know, a million miles away, writing theories about a system in which I was housed at the time. And I felt like in a lot of points they were missing the mark, you know, and I actually felt like the opinions of people like me were way too much neglected in these theories that I was reading. So I said, you know what, I'm going to put something together, not only critiquing, you know, the way in which criminologists do their research, but I'm critiquing the results of some of their research as well, you know. So I'm providing a lot of things that I think could be helpful as far as like making the system more I guess centered around habilitation and less around punition. But it's on Amazon, by the way.
Mhm.
And for reading this book personally, and we did a fundraiser based off of this book when I worked at the transitional house. I think from a research perspective, Tyrone gives a really like a lot of reasons as to why accurate research is lacking so much on the status and living conditions of prisons. And so I think that's really invaluable perspective that's offered in the book as well, because it really does seem like the research that's currently out there based off of people going into prisons are lacking in terms of their validity.
Definitely. Thank you. There's a question from Michael real quick. I'd like to hear more about the connection between the bus stop and the academic social work aspect. What was the interaction between the academics and the performance? So maybe, yeah.
I led one of the conversations for the last day of the play. Thank you to Professor Carroll for making that connection. And so I had the pleasure of watching the play once previously during rehearsals. And so I got to really familiarize myself with what was going to be discussed throughout the play, as well as what might look like in the discussion. And that also gave me the opportunity to talk more with Najee as well. And so just watching the play was really a great experience because, like I said, it gave a really nice picture of an accurate picture, I would say too. I wouldn't just say nice, of what the experiences of loved ones looks like when their people are incarcerated. And so then afterwards, we really just held a pretty open-ended conversation with audience members as well as cast members who came after they had, you know, gotten out of their costume and everything and joined the discussion as well. And so I would say for the most part, in my experience, the audience guided the discussion, but we looked for key themes or ideas that they may have themselves for how can we actually continue this work to address it. A lot of people talk about raising awareness, but what's the next step that we can do as well, as the play in itself is raising awareness? So what in addition can we do? And so that's where a lot of the discussion was focused on as well.
Thank you. And Dr. Harvey was going to say something, Dr. McMurray, and then we have another question about where we could see the play. So Najee will hopefully put that in the chat.
Yeah, why don't Najee? Oh, well, I'm happy to hear Tyrone say that he, you know, it's not that people shouldn't be punished, because when people do things, there should be some level of accountability. But I think the criminal justice system in these United States, and I visited prisons in Uganda and South Africa, is always the same group of people, the less educated and the poor. But in these United States, as Tyrone spoke to it, that our criminal justice system has been grounded in structural racism. There's no question about that. The 13th Amendment, Tyrone talked about the slave patrols. And early in the 1980s, Dr. Charles King said that we have a society that has crippled the people and then blame them for limping. So we need to find that balance and focus on the front end prevention to keep people from getting into that pipeline. That's why I think it is so important, these junior youth groups and children classes, it has to be grounded in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Dr. McMurray. And that's what we're seeing actually in the Baha'i community, not only in the United States, but all over the world, that similar to indigenous therapy, right? Which is the group. It's building community. It's when you have what you want to see in the world, then you are preventing the things that you don't want to see in the world, right? Thank you so much. Are there any other last comments from any of the panelists to close us out? If anybody would like to say something short, you're welcome to do that now.
Yeah, well, now the social work and the academic departments on campus, we're having a meeting this Friday to actually talk about how to move forward.
Mm-hmm. It's really exciting to be a part of this.
Hey, teacher, I just see another question in the chat for Tyrone. I'm a teacher educator. What is the most important thing that they should know? And thank you for buying the book.
Hey, thank you so much. Yeah, for real. So was it Craig? His name is Craig.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say the most important thing to know is it's kind of like a broad or umbrella, I guess, idea that should be known. Is the fact that people who are exiting prison, people who are have been victimized by structures or institutions such as the criminal justice system, like, we are still people and we are still American citizens. You know, I find it very hard for a lot of people out there to call themselves patriots, but to completely turn a blind eye to these very American individuals who are coming home from this American institution. And after having been victimized and demonized and oppressed by this American institution and like for so long, you know, like, if you care about this country, you should care about all of its inhabitants, which includes people who look like me and who have a background like I have, you know. And as far as like, that's a broad, I guess, way to look at it. A more micro approach would be understanding that people who I guess go through the system, there's different stages and different parts of the journey that people go through. You know, catching someone at the moment where they're most receptive to change is vital. But in order to do that, you have to know this person. You have to know who they are. There are a lot of people who come out the system who may not be receptive to all you have to offer as far as opportunities go, you know, but that just means they're not receptive right now. You know, there are plenty of opportunities that I came across since I've been out that I just wasn't receptive to at the time, but you fast forward a year and I was taking advantage of them, you know. Like, when it comes to specific things you can do, I think it's understanding where a person is in their journey, post-prison journey, and then responding accordingly. You know, I would definitely leave with that. Hopefully that answered your question.
I was just gonna piggyback after what you said, Mr. Tyrone. If it was okay if I call you Mr. Tyrone.
You call me Tyrone.
Okay, Tyrone. As I said, my father was incarcerated, and when he did come back, it was kind of hard to communicate because you didn't want to say the wrong thing or not say the right thing. And we were able to get on when he got to where he was ready, we were able to get on the part where we can communicate where he wants us to help and where you don't want to help and where those boundaries are set. Because in that, I'm going to say environment, is you have to have what he says, you have to have a mindset of, I'm working on myself. I want to get better so I can get out and do better. And I was happy to see his growth, but I also know there was a lot of boundaries that we had to get past and still are getting past with his journey even now.
For sure. And I mean, if I may, like, of course, I don't know your father and stuff, but I can say that one thing that is really becoming more and more apparent to me is getting that prison residue out of one system doesn't happen over a set period of time. Like, I came home in August of 2020, you know what I mean? So it's been about 2.5 years now, you know, and I'm still dealing with things that come from in there, you know. And even as far as like you wanting to help your father, there were times where I came home. I got locked up when I was 19. I came home when I was 33. You know what I mean? I became an adult in prison. You know, so when I came home and my family wanted to give me all this help, I actually had to tell them, like, look, y'all, like, I know y'all want to help and I really appreciate it, but the things that I think I can do, let me do it so I can get that sense of self-worth, that sense of accomplishment, that sense of trying to establish my sense of personhood. Like, let me do this just to prove to myself I can do it. You know what I mean? Of course, if I slip up, I'm glad y'all are an amazing chocolate safety net for a brother. I appreciate it. But let me do this so I can get that sense of self-worth. You know what I mean? So it's little issues like that that stem from being in prison where you don't let people do favors for you. You know what I mean? It's being in prison where you either be self-sufficient or you be a victim. You know what I mean? Like, it's so that coming home with that type of mentality, it might be something that helps you in your relationship with your father.
And Chitra, if I can take a second and thank you and the Wilmette Institute, because none of this would have happened had it not been for the Wilmette Institute. So I want to thank you for your support on behalf of North Carolina Central University and the continuing relationship, because for sure this would not have happened without you. I mean, without the support of the Wilmette Institute. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. McMurray. Thank each of you so much for your invaluable contributions to this. In the Q&A, I saw that someone already wants to share the video for the restorative justice work they're doing. I am sure the impact of this video and the PSA and all that has been shared will go far and wide, and that there will be more of this to come. So I look forward to more of our sustained collaboration. And I wanted to also say that the Wilmette Institute does have a social transformation certificate program we just started. The first course is Approaches to Nonviolent Social Change. And then we have a course on human prosperity and sustainable development, and then reconstructing Blackness and building a unified society in the United States. So please feel free to check us out on our website. And if you'd like to contact me, it's cgolestani@wilmetteinstitute.org. I'd love to hear your ideas and thoughts. And until next time, friends, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Oh, really quick, Chitra, people want to know where they can see the play. Najee, is there a place?
Oh, Najee, did you put it in?
No, there's no, yeah, I messaged the person back, but there is no digital available copy of this version of the play. So yeah, you have to see it when it comes to your city, or hopefully when it goes to Broadway. Yeah.
Are there clips on online anywhere, or no clips either?
No, you just gotta be protective of the work you do. So
Yes.
I don't really put stuff like that online. Yeah.
Stay tuned though. It will come around again, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Take good care. Najee, thank you so much.
Thank you.